Have you ever noticed how the word discipline seems to carry a weight, a harshness that makes your body tense up just thinking about it? It's as if every time someone talks about self-discipline, you imagine a general shouting commands in your head, forcing you to do things you don't want to do, to become someone you're not. And then, when you fail to follow those inner commands, that familiar feeling creeps in. Failure, lack of willpower, the belief that you're just too weak to change. But what if I told you that this entire approach is completely wrong? What if real self-discipline had nothing to do with force, control, or punishment, but rather something much more human and gentle? Does that make sense to you? Have you grown tired of fighting with yourself and getting nowhere? Carl Rogers, one of the most revolutionary psychologists of the last century, discovered something that forever changed our understanding of how people truly change. He realized that when we stop fighting ourselves, when we stop trying to mold ourselves by force, something extraordinary happens. We find a strength that comes from within, a motivation that doesn't require constant whipping to stay alive. Rogers called this the actualizing tendency. This natural force that every human being possesses to grow, to develop, to become more fully who they are. It's like a plant that naturally grows toward the sun. It doesn't need to force itself or feel guilty for not growing fast enough. It simply follows its deepest nature. Now think with me, how many times have you tried to change something in your life using sheer willpower? How many times have you made rigid promises to yourself? I'll wake up at 5 every morning. I'll never eat sweets again. I'll study 3 hours a day without fail. And then felt terrible when you couldn't follow through? It's like trying to drive a car with your foot on both the gas and the brake. You make a lot of noise, a lot of effort, but you don't get anywhere. The truth is, this approach to self-discipline, based on control, punishment, and denial of your own feelings, doesn't work because it goes against our most fundamental nature. We are not machines that can be programmed. We are complex human beings, with emotions, fears, needs, and contradictions. And when we try to discipline ourselves while ignoring that complexity, we create an inner war that weakens us instead of strengthening us. Rogers discovered that people only make lasting changes when they feel accepted, understood, and valued for who they are, not for who they should be. He said, "The curious paradox is that when I accept myself just as I am, then I can change." This phrase carries a deep wisdom that completely transforms our approach to self-discipline. Let's slow down and explore this. Imagine you have trouble sticking to an exercise routine. The traditional approach would be, you're lazy, you need to push harder, you need more discipline. But Rogers would show us a different path. He would say, first, let's understand what's going on. What do you feel when you think about exercising? What is this resistance trying to tell you? Maybe when you truly listen, you'll find that your resistance to exercise isn't laziness, but fear of being seen, memories of being judged in school, or simply emotional exhaustion from other areas of life. When you name those things, when you accept them as valid parts of your experience, something shifts. The resistance doesn't magically disappear, but you're no longer fighting it. You're working with it. That's the difference between forced discipline and organic discipline. Forced discipline says, ignore your feelings, push yourself to do what's right. Organic discipline says, listen to your feelings, understand what they're trying to teach you, and then consciously choose how you want to respond. Rogers had a beautiful expression for this. Experiencing, which we might translate as fully experiencing, or deeply living through. He believed the key to any real change lies in our ability to be fully present with our experience, without judgment, without trying to change it immediately, just feeling what is true for us in that moment. Think of how different this is from what we usually do. When we feel lazy, we instantly judge, I shouldn't be feeling this. When we feel fear, we try to ignore it. I need to be braver. When we feel anger, we try to suppress it. Mature people don't get angry. But Rogers taught us that all these feelings carry valuable information about who we are and what we need. True self-discipline begins with a simple question. What am I feeling right now? Not to change it immediately, not to judge whether it's right or wrong, but to understand. Because when you truly understand what's happening inside you, the choices become clearer. Let me give you a practical example. Imagine you want to build the habit of reading more. The traditional approach would be to set a goal. I'll read 30 pages a day, and force yourself to follow through. But what if, instead, you started by asking, why do I want to read more? What does this desire mean to me? You might discover that it's not just about acquiring knowledge, but about having a moment of peace in your day, or feeling more cultured, or reconnecting with parts of yourself that have been dormant. When you understand the deeper why, the how becomes more natural. Instead of forcing yourself to read 30 pages a day, maybe you discover that what you really need is 15 minutes of quiet with a book in hand. Maybe you find that you read better in the morning, or that you need a special reading nook, or that certain kinds of books resonate more with you at this stage in your life. Rogers called this congruence, the alignment between what you feel, what you think, and what you do. When your actions are born from this congruence, they don't require constant willpower to maintain. They flow naturally because they're aligned with who you really are. But here's the most important point. This journey of self-awareness and acceptance isn't always comfortable. Rogers knew this. He said that to grow means to be willing to face aspects of ourselves we'd rather ignore. It means admitting our vulnerabilities, our fears, our contradictions. And that requires a different kind of courage. Not the courage to force ourselves, but the courage to see ourselves. Rogerian discipline is like learning to surf. You don't fight the wave. You learn to read its movement, to position yourself, to work with its force. Sometimes you fall, and that doesn't mean you failed. It means you're learning. The next wave will be different, and you'll be a bit more prepared to dance with it. This completely transforms our relationship with what we call failures. In the traditional approach, when you break a streak, skip a week of exercise, or eat something you shouldn't, it becomes proof of your lack of discipline. But from the Rogerian perspective, it becomes valuable information. What was going on that week that made it hard to work out? What was your body or mind asking for when you chose that food? Not to justify, but to understand. Rogers once said something that always moves me deeply. I am more effective when I can listen acceptantly to myself and can be myself. Translated to the context of self-discipline, you are more disciplined when you stop fighting who you are and start working with who you are. That doesn't mean passively accepting everything or using self-understanding as an excuse not to change. It means understanding that real change comes from love, not fear, from clarity, not confusion, from accepting what is, not denying reality. And here's something Rogers discovered that could transform your life today. Genuine self-discipline isn't a state you reach and hold on to forever. It's a living relationship you develop with yourself, day by day, moment by moment. It's like learning to dance with your own complexity. Think of a dance. When you're just learning, you consciously focus on each move, each step, each rhythm. At first it's awkward. You step on your own foot, you lose the beat. But as you practice, you develop an intimacy with the movement, a trust in your own body. You don't stop thinking entirely, but you no longer need to force each gesture. The dance starts to flow through you. Rogerian self-discipline is like that. At first, you need to consciously stop and ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? What is my body telling me? What does this resistance want to teach me? It's a deliberate process of self-listening. But over time, that listening becomes more natural, more integrated into your way of being. Rogers spoke of this when he described what he called fully functioning, a way of existing where you're in constant contact with your own experience, where your choices emerge from that deep connection with yourself, not from external rules or expectations that don't make sense for who you are. A fully functioning person, according to Rogers, is someone who trusts their own experience as a guide for life. That doesn't mean being impulsive or irresponsible. It means having developed a refined ability to listen to all aspects of a situation, your emotions, your needs, your values, the possible consequences, and to make decisions from that whole listening. Let me tell you something that may sound contradictory at first. The most disciplined people I've ever met, the ones who maintain habits for years and make deep changes in their lives, are also the most flexible with themselves. They've developed a skill I call adaptive discipline. the ability to adjust their plans and expectations without losing sight of their deepest values and goals. For example, imagine someone who has the goal of exercising regularly. In the rigid approach, this person would set a fixed schedule, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 7 to 8 a.m., no exceptions. And when life happens, an unexpected meeting, a sick child, a period of intense stress, and the schedule can't be followed, guilt sets in, the feeling of failure arises, and often the goal is completely abandoned. But someone with adaptive discipline would approach it differently. They would set the intention to move regularly, but stay attuned to the body's signals, the rhythm of life, the demands of the moment. Some days it might be a 20-minute walk, other days an intense gym session, and on others, just some gentle stretching at home. What remains constant is not the specific form, but the deep commitment to one's own well-being. Rogers understood that life is dynamic, not static. We change. Our circumstances change. Our needs change. A discipline that cannot adapt to these changes is not discipline. It's rigidity. And rigidity, sooner or later, breaks. This reminds me of a metaphor Rogers liked to use: the difference between an oak tree and a bamboo in a storm. The oak, rigid and inflexible, might withstand the wind for a while, but when the storm is too strong, it breaks. The bamboo, flexible and adaptable, bends with the wind, dances with the storm, and when it passes, it rises again, unharmed. Rogerian self-discipline is like bamboo. It has deep roots, your values, your purpose, your sense of who you really are. But on the surface, it's flexible, able to adapt to life's storms without losing its essence. But how do you develop this disciplined flexibility? How do you find that balance between firmness and adaptability? Rogers would give us an answer that might seem simple, but is profoundly revolutionary. By starting where you are, with what you have, being who you are right now. Don't wait until you have more willpower to start practicing self-compassion. Don't wait until you feel more motivated to start listening to your emotions. Don't wait until you have more free time to start paying attention to yourself. Start today, in this moment, with what is possible right now. Maybe it's just pausing for 5 seconds before making a decision and asking yourself, what do I really want here? Maybe it's acknowledging without judgment that you're tired today and adjusting your expectations accordingly. Maybe it's admitting that the goal you set at the beginning of the year no longer makes sense for who you've become and being willing to revisit it. Rogers had a beautiful expression for this: becoming. He saw life not as a fixed state, but as a continuous process of becoming more fully who you are. And that means your discipline can also always be becoming. Evolving, refining, growing more aligned with your truth. Think about how that frees you from the tyranny of perfection. You don't have to get it right the first time. You don't have to maintain a perfect streak to be a disciplined person. You don't need to have everything figured out before you start making changes in your life. You just need to be willing to start where you are and keep learning about yourself along the way. This creates a completely different relationship with what we call relapses, or slip-ups. In the traditional perspective, when you break a habit streak or make a choice that wasn't part of your plan, it's seen as evidence of a lack of discipline. But from the Rogerian perspective, it's valuable information about yourself and about how you can adjust your approach. Rogers used to say that experience is the best teacher. Every time you fail to maintain a habit, every time you make a choice you later question, every time you feel misaligned with your goals, you are gathering data about how you work, what you need, what works for you, and what doesn't. The question is not, why did I fail again? But what can I learn about myself from this experience? That shift in perspective transforms failure into feedback, problems into information, and guilt into curiosity. And here lies the beautiful paradox of the Rogerian approach. When you stop punishing yourself for not being perfect, you create space to become more genuinely disciplined. When you stop wasting energy fighting yourself, you have more energy available to make the choices that truly matter. Think of a specific area in your life where you've been struggling to stay disciplined. Maybe it's a study routine, a healthier diet, or simply going to bed earlier. Instead of asking, how can I force myself to do this? Try asking, what's making this difficult for me? What do I need to understand about myself in this area? What would a kind and sustainable version of this change look like? Rogerian self-discipline recognizes that you are a whole human being, not just willpower walking around. You have a body that's sometimes tired, emotions that are sometimes confused, relationships that sometimes drain your energy, responsibilities that sometimes overload your mind. True discipline means learning to work with all of these elements, not despite them. That means that sometimes the most disciplined thing you can do is rest when you're exhausted, even if your goal says to keep going. Sometimes it's crying when you're sad, even if your schedule doesn't have time for tears. Sometimes it's asking for help when you're overwhelmed, even if your self-image says you should be able to handle it all on your own. Rogers understood something that our productivity-obsessed culture has forgotten. We are not machines optimized for constant performance. We are living, complex organisms that need time to process, integrate, rest, and renew. Discipline that ignores this will always collapse sooner or later. True transformation happens when you stop trying to fix yourself and start trying to know yourself. When you stop asking, "Why can't I do this?" and start asking, "What am I trying to tell myself?" When you stop fighting your resistance and start listening to what it has to teach you. Rogers spoke about this in a way that always gives me chills. When someone really hears me without passing judgment on me, without trying to take responsibility for me, without trying to mold me, it feels damn good. Now imagine offering that same kind of listening to yourself. What if you could hear yourself without judgment, without trying to force yourself into a shape, simply offering compassionate presence to your own experience? Imagine what your life would be like if you could trust yourself, not your ability to be perfect, but your ability to adjust, to learn, to grow from what is real for you. Imagine making decisions not because a self-help book said you should, but because those decisions make deep sense for who you are and who you're becoming. That kind of trust, not in your perfection, but in your ability to grow, is what Rogers saw as the foundation of all lasting change. It's what allows you to be kind to yourself without being complacent, to be flexible without being careless, to be human without using that as an excuse not to evolve. This is the kind of self-discipline Rogers taught us. A discipline rooted in radical honesty with yourself, compassion for your journey, and trust that when you accept yourself as you are, you can consciously choose who you want to become. Change begins today, in this moment, with a simple choice: to stop fighting yourself and start truly listening. You don't need to wait until you become someone different to start living with more alignment. You can start exactly where you are, with exactly what you have, being exactly who you are right now. If this space feels meaningful to you, if you recognize it as a safe place to explore your own truth without judgment, consider subscribing. Not because you need more content in your life, but because you deserve to have places where you can be fully human while discovering who you really are.